Good evening. I'm coming to you tonight from a new place. I'm visiting family down in South Florida, and I'm recording this in the living room of a family member's house. They're not home, so I don't have to worry about them wondering what's happened to their nephew. But I thought I'd record a video tonight that's just sort of a ramble, kind of loosely themed around the idea of can you go home again? And it's apt in my situation right now because not only am I back in the place I grew up, visiting family for the holidays, but I recently, in the past month or so, was presented with the opportunity to accept a job down here and to move from where I live now, which is in Maryland, back down to where I grew up, which is Miami. I haven't made up my mind yet what I want to do. In part, that was the purpose, or that was one of the purposes of this trip, and in part, it's I guess part of the purpose of this video too is for me to, maybe if I'm going through the pros and cons with you, maybe I can, in the process, kind of work it out in my own mind a little better, because I'm pretty mixed up about it at the moment. I don't have all my equipment here, so this is not going to be a traditional ASMR video. It's just going to be me talking. I only have the one mic. This room's a little echoey, as you probably noticed. I can't guarantee there won't be other noises popping in, but I mean, it is going to be soft-spoken and just kind of stream of consciousness, rambly, based on my experience of the last few days. I've spent some time driving around Miami and the surrounding suburbs, and Fort Lauderdale a little bit, and Miami Beach. And I've, got a little footage that I may intersperse. Well, I'm going to intersperse here and there as I discuss the pros and the cons. So there's definitely a difference and I guess I should preface all this by saying that I know I'm not going to be making any grand revelations here. This is all going to be basically pop psychology 101, pop philosophy 101, conclusions that almost everybody watching could probably just say, yeah, well, I could have told you that at the beginning. And certainly, if I look at this as cold and as calculated as possible, the answer to what I should or should not do is clear. It's fairly clear to me, but we are not creatures of ice, so there's a lot of emotion and a lot of my past both here and where I live now in Maryland. And a lot of other factors that make this more difficult than just a pros and a cons list is very valuable and will certainly help me make a decision. But it's not just a matter of the numbers; it's other stuff too. So forgive me if I come to a conclusion that seems really obvious from the start. It's not. Once I factor in everything, it's just not clear to me. When you visit somewhere, well, you know what? Let me start a little bit with my history up to this point. I was born in Miami. I was raised in Miami. I lived exclusively in Miami. Although we moved quite a bit, it was always within the confines of Miami or a suburb of Miami. And I moved away from the city in my early mid-20s, mid-25, right around there. I've moved a lot in my life. I've probably moved at least 20 times. It's part of the nature of the business that I'm in, that it's fairly migratory. You don't get the luxury of sort of, a lot of jobs are like this now. You don't, work at one place, one firm for your entire career and get a great retirement package, and once you take your first steady job, not have to worry about where you're going to be 5 years from then for the rest of your life. It's not the way it works with most jobs anymore. It's certainly not the way it works with mine. I have to constantly be looking for the next thing, which is draining and tiring. And truth be told, if I had it to do over again, I probably would have picked a different field. It's very rewarding too. There are pros and cons to my job as well, but I am where I am. This is I want to say the hand I've been dealt, but it wasn't the hand I was dealt. It was they were the cards that I chose specifically. So I'm going to play them and not complain too much beyond what I just did about how I came to this point. But the takeaway from all that is my job means I move a lot. It's also not a job where there are a lot of places to go. There are hubs. There are international hubs, and there are domestic hubs, and there's a fair amount of them. But it's not like I can just pick any city I want at random and say, I want to live there, and I'll just get a job in my field there. That's not the way it works. I'm confined to a certain a city that has this particular industry. Even if it's just a single upstart or a crowd of them. So I've got when I left here at 25, in part that's why I left, was because my chosen field there weren't many opportunities here. So I moved around quite a bit. Like I said, something like 20 times over. That sounds like a whole lot, and it is a lot, but a lot of those were actually condensed into over the course of a couple of years. I think, broadly speaking, I get, if things go well, 5 years somewhere. If things are a little bit dicey, maybe 2 or 3 years somewhere. It makes it hard to put down roots. It makes it hard to buy property or count on being in a city or getting too attached to a city or an area, because you just don't know where you're going to be a few years down the line. But anyway, so I bopped around primarily the East Coast, in fact exclusively the East Coast. I don't think I've ever been more than 30 minutes from the Atlantic Ocean, but I've lived in enough places and know enough people that I think anywhere from Miami to New York, my car could break down anywhere along that route, 95 going to 75, or 85, and I'd be within 30 minutes or an hour of either someone I know or someplace I lived, even if it was brief. But I don't like, obviously I'm not you can tell by the paleness of my skin, I'm not a sun worshiper, but I do like to be near the ocean. There's something about the air when you're within, say, 10 to 15 miles of a coast, that just seems less stagnant than when you're further inland, at least to me. And all of this, everything I'm saying here is with the very, very well acknowledged prejudice that I grew up in a coastal town, and I've lived in coastal towns my entire life. So there's no disrespect to anyone in the Midwest. I just feel like when I go to the Midwest, I can feel the absence of the ocean. Maybe it's in my head, but I don't think it is. It feels pretty genuine to me. Maybe it's something as simple as a smell. I don't know. But yeah, so I've lived up and down the East Coast, and like I said, currently I'm in Maryland. I like Maryland. I think of all the places I've been, Maryland is my favorite. There's a lot I like about it. There's a lot I don't like about it, but the same goes for Miami. Right? And sort of the weight of history and these memories, and when it comes to Miami, sort of being somewhere where almost every few blocks, and Miami's a big city, landmass wise it's huge. I think it's one of the biggest cities, I think it's one of the biggest metropolitan areas in the United States, because it's just so widespread. The sprawl there is, and this is a bad thing, is unprecedented. I guess LA has a beat. I'm sure there are other cities that do, but Miami's up there. And one of the absence of city planning, I think, is very apparent. It seems like they just took sort of the same 20 square blocks and then took that and just sort of rubber stamped it down over and over and over again. 30 miles from north to south and from east to west, with very few pockets of interest or corners that you'll turn and be surprised. No, you're not. It's going to be the same strip mall. It's going to be the same Publix, which is our regional grocery store down here. The same CVS or Walgreens. The same architecture. The architecture down here is pretty homogeneous and boring, and that includes the residential architecture. Way too many townhomes and apartments. Not enough homes, even small homes. Property values are really out of whack, considering you're technically in Miami in these places, but you're still 20 miles from downtown. So, there are those things, and on the other hand, in most of Maryland, you have, the urban areas of Maryland that are not great, can be dangerous. I think more dangerous probably than Miami. There's a lot of violent crime, and then you have the suburban areas, which are tend to be more homes, far fewer apartments. Sort of you could, first of all, there's a third dimension, right, in Maryland and in anywhere. We're not, Florida's sort of a few feet of dirt, and then you hit limestone, and it's pretty much flat almost all the way to the northern extent. Everything is at 0 feet sea level. It's right at sea level. And there's just not a lot of diversity either in the height of the land or the flora. It's palm trees, melaleucas, a lot of secondary growth, a lot of shrubs. We don't, like I said, there's limestone a few feet under the ground, so we don't get trees that have deep root systems. They tend to have things like banyans, which beautiful trees, by the way, but they have really sort of wide root systems that don't go very deep. Same thing with palm trees. These are trees that tend not to grow too big, because if they do, they fall over, or they get knocked over by a hurricane, or even if it's not a hurricane, even if we get no hurricanes in South Florida in a given summer, it's blustery. There's a blustery storm in summer, probably almost like clockwork, daily at around 3 p.m. in the afternoon. So trees that are too tall or have trees with lofty aspirations tend to get knocked over. So you take those things, you take the kind of flat land and the trees that are not as tall and aren't as old either, and what you get is just a sort of, you spin in a circle and you can see the horizon. You can see very far, because there's nothing obstructing your view, which is great for driving. I don't enjoy driving when you can't see more than a few feet ahead of you because of another hill, another curve. But as far as picturesque, there's no beating sort of the elevation changes that you get up north, and the huge trees and the more diverse trees coupled with that make for very interesting vistas that you don't really get in Florida, at least not in the suburban areas. Florida is tropical, so you get some really pretty beaches. The ocean's beautiful, the beach is beautiful, the Everglades are beautiful, but you don't get much. There's not much that's artificial. There's not much that's man-made that's beautiful in Florida. And I know I'm speaking in really broad strokes here, but there's not a whole lot of history. What is beautiful about Florida tends to be what is natural, and that's not necessarily true in areas that have more history, where you have this sort of, large variation in architecture and ages of buildings, and you come around a bend and you see this beautiful decaying grain silo barn, and or a stone tower that looks like it's right out of sort of Arthurian legend. You don't get that kind of stuff in Florida. You get a lot of stuff that was built in the 70s and the 80s, and not necessarily all of it kept in good repair. A lot of Art Deco, some of it's updated, some of it's not, and Art Deco is definitely, in my opinion, not a timeless architectural style. You can only see so many cement square houses with glass block windows before they start to look like prisons. So I'm talking, I'm definitely talking a lot of crap about Miami right now, and I realize that, and it might seem like, well, what do your decision is made. Why are you belaboring this point? It's obvious you're prejudiced against Miami for whatever reason. So what is Miami's case? And it's a good question. And that's part of why I came down here. I wanted to put Miami is a city that it's called the Magic City, right? And I think that's a pretty apt moniker because it's good at misdirection and sleight of hand, and it's very good at when you visit Miami, and other cities are like this as well, to greater or lesser extents, but I think Miami is better at it than most. It's not as good at it as, say, Las Vegas or whatever, but Miami is a city that it's easy to visit and think, oh, I really like to live here. I had fun. This place was fun. Man, I want to move down there. Miami is good at giving you a week or two of enjoyment and sort of, saying, hey, look up here. Don't look at this stuff. Just look here. At the pretty lights and at A1A and the beaches and and ignore all the other stuff. And it's easy to do that. And it's easy to do that, even as someone who grew up here, it's easy to do that when you come back and you're visiting friends and places that you remember and having memories triggered, at countless street corners and places. It's easy to get sucked into that. So I wanted to be more objective. I wanted to kind of try and make this trip while keeping myself in the mindset of I want to do the things that I would do if I was living here. I want to experience the things I would experience if I was living here. I don't want to come here and go to Coral Castle and go to South Point Beach on Miami Beach, or go to Vizcaya Gardens and visit with all my friends, because then I would come away having had a jolly old time, and my view would be skewed. And the thing that I don't want, I just want to have a realistic view of what my choices are, because the worst thing would be for me to do something like that and then accept the position down here, move down here, and after a week be like, what have I done? I've made a terrible mistake. It's sort of right out of Arrested Development. So I don't want to do that. So, and I realize it's probably a naive assumption to think that you can, when you're coming back to a place that you haven't been in a long time, to think that you can put all that nostalgia aside, even if you, say, choose not to let any of your friends know that you're visiting, even if you choose to partake in the morning and or afternoon traffic that is nearly, I say morning and afternoon traffic, but traffic in Miami is nearly ubiquitous. I mentioned before that the city planner should get a smack across, a ruler across the wrists, because there are very few effective expressways. It's just suburban block after suburban block, and red light after red light, stop sign after stop sign. Lately, apparently a lot of these stop signs and stoplights, the trendy thing here now, which had to have happened in the last few years, is roundabouts. They've put these roundabouts in lots of places where they didn't need them. They don't belong. I guess they think they're aesthetically more pleasing than a stop sign, and I guess it's hard to argue that, but they're also not as effective or efficient as a stop sign, and people don't know how to use them. But yeah, I'm sorry I got off track there. So I wanted to come down here and try and get in the mindset of living here, and then leave and make an objective decision based on that and lots of other factors. So, a lot of the negatives about Miami I've gone over. There's, I have, like I said, when I lived in Miami, even within Miami, I moved a lot. So I have memories associated with almost every subdivision. And that's good and bad, and I'm certainly noticing that strange feeling that you get, that I've gotten the past few days driving around. The notion that place is important, totally wrong, disproven. Time is what matters, place is not what matters, because a lot of my friends have moved on and are unlikely to ever return. Some of them can't return. So I have these memories of these places, and there's some part of me that felt like this city is a cradle for me. in that, I will never feel sort of like, to a greater extent than I feel about the entire East Coast, like a concentrated knowledge of the people and the area and the things that have the history of the area. I have a pretty good functional knowledge of that stuff, and but I'm finding, trying to approach it objectively, that this just doesn't mean anything. Like I said, these people that these memories are associated with have largely moved on and will not come back. Or motorcycle. Let's wait till that's gone. Or some of them have died, which makes the memory negative for me. So what I found when I spent some time just kind of driving around, sort of doing instead of going to the tourist spots, I was going to the tourist spots in my own head. And what I found was that instead of being comforted by a lot of these places, some of them, depending on how they had changed, a lot of them geographically had changed significantly, some of them to the point where I didn't recognize them. That's to be expected, and I don't begrudge progress. I don't know if I'm being too charitable by calling it progress, but so some of them had changed so much that I didn't recognize them. Some of them looked exactly the same, and while they sparked, these pleasant memories, they also sort of sparked the realization that nothing associated with those memories exists anymore, except for the trigger of the memory itself, the configuration, the placement of the building, the way the building looks, the structure, whatever it is, the playground, whatever it was. These things triggered memories, some memories that I didn't realize I still had. So they were successful in doing that, but it was immediately followed by a sort of melancholy, which was, to what end, right? What good is it? What mattered was the time. This was special to you, not because of where it was or even what it was, but because of when it was and who you were when you experienced it, and that person is gone too. And that's the biggest, out of all those things, that's the biggest thing, is that, I'm not the person I was when I experienced these memories. I wish I could, I don't know. I wish I could get that person back at will and then dismiss them again at will, because I wouldn't want to be that person again. And yet, I miss the sense of wonder and pleasure at small things that person experienced. I'm a fairly cynical person, probably more cynical than the average person, but I wouldn't say I'm an extremely cynical person. I think a lot of this is just the result of age, and is probably natural. But it's very sad. It's sad to see these things and to experience these memories, and for my biochemistry to have the reaction it does now, which is nothing, generally. And then, that sort of makes what was pleasant just sort of an empty experience. And some of those places, some of them I still got very good feeling from. Some of them I got sort of nothing from. Some of them I got sort of a Dutch angle, sort of creepy, weird, surreal vibe from that made me even more uncomfortable than if it had been a place I'd never seen before. And that was surprising to me. And maybe it's because there's a lot to take in. I mean, I visited, I've been driving around the city now for the past few days. It's pretty much what I've been doing. So it's a lot to take in. But, these are places I haven't seen, some of them in 20 years, some of them in 30 years. So I would expect there to be a sort of mix of emotions, even some of that mix being the absence of emotion. The first time I see them, were I to drive around to those places again tomorrow, I would probably experience a lesser version of what I experienced over the past couple days. Eventually, it will probably be gone altogether. But the thing, definitely of those reactions, I expected to either feel a sort of pleasant nostalgia or a sort of melancholy nostalgia, or more melancholy nostalgia. I was not expecting for some of these things to actually appear nefarious, and I was not expecting a complete lack of reaction to some of these places. So that surprised me. But like I said, Miami is not all bad. I'm glad I grew up here. I think I was very fortunate to grow up here. I wish Miami were not so remote. I wish, for instance, by car, it's 8 hours to get out of the state. It's ridiculous. And then you're in Georgia. What good does that do you? I mean, in Maryland, we're very close to Philadelphia, very close to DC, a couple hour train ride from New York. It's closer to a lot of other things. Now, admittedly, and I've realized this about where I live. The best thing about where you live is its proximity to other places you'd rather be. Then you're not living in a great place then either. But it's not the only thing that I like about Maryland. But I wanted to talk about some of the things I liked about Miami, since I feel like I've basically just been complaining about it for this whole time. The biome, although it is homogeneous, largely, it is beautiful. I love the Everglades, and I love the beaches that we have here, and I love the Keys. The Keys are, they're a great place to unwind. I love the sort of attitude that people have there. I love that sort of Cape Cod architecture that they adopted, and the kind of laid-back atmosphere. It's great. It's great. Growing up here, I'm really appreciative of the fact that there were so many diverse cultures within Miami. Lots of South Americans, Central Americans, Cubans, Puerto Ricans. Just a smorgasbord of, Hispanic, Latino, all mixed together. there's definitely, a vibe, a sort of, I want to say, a more genuine honesty, I feel like, in the Hispanic Latino community. You know where you stand. They're very passionate people. I feel more like I am Hispanic than Caucasian because all of my friends were either Peruvian, Colombian, or Cuban. I grew up surrounded by that culture and immersed in that culture. And there's a lot I love about that, and there's a lot about that I miss. I miss the openness. I miss the sort of wearing your heart on your sleeve. I tend to be reserved, but I prefer to be around people who are the opposite of that. And I like to feed off that and to allow that to sort of break down my defenses. So, I really, really enjoy that. I enjoy the sort of the kind of party atmosphere that goes on a lot of the time. It's very freewheeling. There's a lot of aggression as well, which is not great, but I would 99 times out of 100, I will take straight aggression over the sort of passive-aggressive tendencies that I think are more prevalent in, say, Caucasian community. So, I felt very lucky that I grew up around that. Maria was in 80, 81, sometime around then. And that's when, Miami exploded. It doubled, tripled, quadrupled in size, in population, and just lots of interesting stores and grocery stores and restaurants and all this kind of stuff popped up. And that stuff, that was all great. And being surrounded by that culture, I think, made me a better person. I don't know how I would have been if I had grown up in the sort of cloistered middle America suburb where everybody on the street was Caucasian and went to the same church and went to sleep by 9 o'clock and all that kind of stuff. I don't know what I would have, what sort of person I would have been had I been surrounded with that. But like I said, I feel fortunate that I was not. So I miss that. I miss that a lot. That's probably the openness of the people and the friendliness of the people is one of the things I miss the most, because in Maryland, people tend to be more reserved. There's a lot more sort of walls that are up. I miss the beaches. When I was a kid, I went to the beaches all the time. Then I discovered, computers, and that pretty much spelled the end for beaches. But as I grow older, I appreciate that kind of stuff more. So I miss that. I miss just sort of lazily being in a chaise lounge with a beer, watching the sunrise. Unfortunately, I'm on the East Coast. You have to be on the West Coast of Florida if you want to watch it set. So the skies, the sunrises and the sunsets, but just the skies in general in Florida are remarkably colorful. That's also something that I missed greatly. And I really dislike heat, but I think I dislike cold more. I was in Maryland for the snowpocalypse of 2009, I think it was. 2009, 2010, where we basically got 3 feet of snow one week and then 3 feet of snow the next week before they'd gotten a chance to plow the first 3 feet of snow. So, my mailbox was under snow. And the city kind of ground to a halt for a good week, trying to take care of that. Of course, Florida has hurricanes, so that's not fun, and that's always a little bit of tension in the back of your mind between the months of I think it's May to November, it's hurricane season. So, there's that. But there's also something nice about a tropical storm, as long as it's not too hot. And, one of the things about hurricanes and tropical storms, Florida has the limestone problem, which means a lot of its power lines are still above ground, which means they're susceptible to being knocked out by high winds. The only good thing from that is there seems to be a tendency to, once a strong frontal system like that goes through, cool air comes behind it. So a lot of times, you'll lose your power, but it'll be 10 degrees cooler the next day, and it's actually kind of neat. And, I was here for Hurricane Andrew in 1992, and that was terrible, and weeks without power. And the National Guard was down here and came close to declaring martial law, and there were all kinds of looting and murders, and it was pretty chaotic. And if you obviously was eclipsed by Katrina because of the dam issue, which just caused a huge amount of flooding. That we didn't get flooding when Andrew came through. We just got the brunt of the storm. But it was pretty horrible. So I'm not really looking forward to that either. But I don't like snow for more than, if it snows twice in a winter, that's enough for me. I don't need any more than that. I know there are people who love when it's really cold outside and start a fire and put the heat on and make it really warm and toasty inside, and they like that feeling. I don't, because you can probably hear, like, I have a deviated septum, and kind of post-nasal drip issues contributes to the kind of nasal quality of my voice. So one of the things about living in Florida is you're pretty much in a humidifier 24/7. I could feel it around me right now. My skin, when I rub my fingers together, it's not dry. It feels like I've got a little bit of moisturizer on them, and that's because of the huge amount of humidity. It's terrible for your hair. It's great for your skin. It's great for breathing. When I first moved up north, my nose bled almost every day for a good 3 months because of how dry the air was. It was really harsh. Here it's like I'm standing in front of a nebulizer, so that's great. So yeah, I've got a decision to make. Maryland is beautiful. The fauna in both Maryland and Florida, they're both interesting and unique. When I moved up north, I missed lizards a lot. And when I was a kid growing up, every kid growing up in the South, right? They have a fascination with lizards because they're everywhere and they're like little dinosaurs, and they're neat to watch. I forget what it's called, but the red thing underneath their neck inflate and deflate. And iguanas, we have Cuban anoles and the rhinoceros iguanas, I think they're called, and they're just a thing, right? You see a 2.5 foot iguana in the middle of the road, and it's just like, yeah, it's not like, wow, look at that thing. It's just a thing that happens. I've seen a couple since I've been here, and alligators, while they are ostensibly dangerous, especially if you're an idiot, I wouldn't want to get rid of them. I find them fascinating, and I haven't seen one since I've come down, but I haven't really been looking for them. I'm sure had I been, I could have. Of course, there are some crocodiles too, and those are much more aggressive. I could do without them. But alligators, unless you're walking a small dog near a retention pond, you should be okay. It's not strictly true. I recall some deaths directly related to alligators in the early, I think like 2002, 2003, down here. But I still think they're fascinating, and again, it's sort of this glimpse into the past. But then, up north you have deer. I know everybody who lives up north, including myself now, finds deer to be a nuisance. They just eat all your flowers and all your interesting plants and take craps all over your yard and move on. But I still think they're beautiful. I mean, I will sometimes be driving home from work, and the road I take home from work is kind of this winding road through a bunch of farmland, hilly farmland, and there's a corner that I go by, and there's a hill up to the side, and there's always, well, not always, but oftentimes there will be 50 or 60 deer just in this field, and it's beautiful. Same thing with horses. There's horses everywhere up there. There's horses down here too, but they're not on display quite the same way as they are up north because you don't have the hills. Everything is flat, as I mentioned before. So, yeah, I've got some more thinking to do, I think. I was surprised by a lot of the feelings that I've had over the past few days. My sister found me this at a, this is a non sequitur, I know, but my sister found me this at a yard sale and picked it up for me. It is a Saturn telescope. I have not yet looked up sort of how old it is, but it works, and it's very pretty, and because I don't have my microphones here, I don't know if this is going to give any kind of ASMR, but to me what struck me about it was the sort of sounds that it makes with that cap, and this one, like I said, I don't know if the microphone's going to be able to pick this up right. And it's got that cap thing. And I had asked my sister to look out for maritime props that I still need for the Pioneer's Lash stuff. She got me this, which I thought was really cool. And this pulls out, and the way that you focus it is these clicks. So yeah, you look through it and you click it till whatever you're looking at is in focus. And it works. It's actually quite good. I think it's maybe 10 times magnification. I'm not 100% sure. This is I almost think this had to be replaced or something. And this, no, that's metal. But this is so smooth. It looks much newer than the rest of the telescope. I'm gonna have to do some more research on this, but I thought this was sweet. But of course, I'm sure I'll use it as a prop, but I'll also probably just use it as an ASMR thing. But yeah, like I said, this is not an ASMR video. I just had this, so I thought I'd share it. So, that is where I am. Sort of a lot to figure out over the next week or so. I'm of course happy to hear anyone's opinion on either South Florida or Maryland, which technically is still the South because it's just south of the Mason-Dixon line. But they both have their appeal. I have popped up here while I was talking about these things a bunch of images of Miami that I've taken over the past less than a week, and there's beauty, there's peace, there's a lot of wonderful things down here. There's also Santeria and a lot of aggression and a lot of traffic and a lot of heat and a fair amount of remoteness. So, gotta figure it out. Anyway, I'm gonna end this before I could probably go on forever talking about Miami or Maryland. But if you have any counters to anything I've said, or if anything I've said is inaccurate, please leave a comment. Let me know. I'm going to get back to more story-based, scripted stuff once I get back up to Maryland. Even if I move, I'll still be up there for a little while. But I need my basement to do that stuff. I can't do that stuff here because, like I said, I don't really have the equipment. I don't have my green screen. I don't have my microphones or any of that stuff. So, but yeah, so I'll get to that when I can, and hope everybody had a happy Christmas or Hanukkah or Kwanzaa. And I'll talk to y'all again soon.